I thought since I thought that this is Indian literature, let me connect the film text to literature too. With this disclaimer at the outset, let me proceed. It's actually many of the, it's Freud. Why many of the people? Freud, who says that childhood is very crucial to one's life. And it's childhood which decides our whole personality in the future rather than persona. And today we all are aware in India, we have this Child Labor Acts. One of my friends is in Labor Department, used to be in Labor Department, now she is in ATI. We have Labor Acts, but I don't know how far Labor Act is applicable to our society, because all of us are aware at a certain juncture there is this child labor which is in practice. That's a sociological side to the issue. When I was talking about some younger friend of Allama Prabhu. Yes, sir.
Madam.
Younger friend or?
Madam, he is my son.
Oh, how nice. I get to see many young people here. Hello. Okay.
Yes, madam.
Yeah, I just thought I will say hello to your son. Anyway, I was talking about the kind of the childhood that is portrayed in literature. There are many, many works, of course, especially reminiscences, biographies, autobiographies, even literary works discuss childhood to a great extent. And in fact, childhood is very crucial to one's life. And one of the arguments that I hold in my research is this. While rendering childhood, especially childhood in an autobiography, if an autobiography is written by an inner compulsion of an individual, one cannot go wrong. One's tone of voice cannot go wrong. This is a term which I have borrowed from Richard Hogarth. Richard Hogarth, a great Marxist critic from England. Actually, tone of voice is one of the concepts which I have dealt in my research, where I speak of the tone of an autobiography. You know, all of us are teachers of English, and all of us are, rather than teachers, we are all students of literature. We all have studied poem. And all of us know the soul of poem is tone, right? Tone is the soul of a poem. In fact, one of the friends from our own background, literary background, was telling me the other day that why should we know English the way English must know? You know, it's hard to know the accents, intonations of the English people. But you know, to render a poem, we need to have an English accent, or at least to understand the subtleties of language, we need to know it. When I said it, the other person agreed. And we know that, how do we recognize tone of a poem? Could any one of you contribute? How do we recognize the tone of a poem? How do we? Do we need to recognize the tone of a poem while reading a poem? Do we need to? How do we read a poem? How do we read a poem?
Content.
Through content. Who was it? Who said that?
Ma'am, Rani Ratna Prabha here.
Rani Ratna Prabha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Your name, yeah. Rani Ratnaprabha, thank you.
Madam, taking era into the this context where it was written.
Okay, background, historical background. You mean
Historical background. And,
okay, yeah, sure.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Am I asking you a very basic question?
Ma'am, after
Context.
reading
The context.
Context. Okay, thank you. It was Rani Ratnaprabha.
Choice of words,
Guru Raj, choice of words. It was a Navam, sir, right?
Yeah,
sir?
yeah, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, ma'am.
Param Guru Raj, sir, you were about to say something. Please, I am interested. I am listening to you, sir. Am I audible, sir? Guru Raj, sir?
Ma'am,
Yes, sir.
ma'am, after reading the poem, we could come to get contact with the writer's mind. Then we can pursue that in which mood it is conveyed. So after that, we could easily understand, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Madam, we cannot say this is the tone of the poem because whenever we read the poem and however we read, the meaning will be changed, and we cannot say this is the tone of the poem. The more the times we read the poem, and the more the meanings we get.
Do you think so, sir?
Madam,
Patil, sir?
pitch and voice modulation.
Yeah, madam. Yeah.
Depends
That
on
is
voice modulation. Who was it who said that?
Vishnu. Pitch of.
You are not visible here, sir. That's why this shows me only half of the participants. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Pitch and.
Okay. Now you are visible. Okay. It depends on intonation. You mean to say?
Yeah, pitch.
Pitch. Okay. Okay. But don't you think, where is this new criticism which says that a text is an autotelic entity by itself? It's autotelic. What do they mean by it?
Definitely, madam. Text is always auto-telling because the choice of words speak what the poet is intended to write in the poem.
Right.
When we come to know the intention of the poet, it will definitely tell the tone of the poem.
Okay, thank you. Priyanka wants to say something, I believe.
Madam, good afternoon, madam.
Yes, sir. Rangapagol, sir. Tell
Madam,
me.
in my perspective, madam, the tone of the poem is depend on how we are interpreting the lines or words, how we are perceiving the words, madam. The tone is dependent on that, madam.
Thank you. Ma'am Priyanka, you want to say something?
Like through the semantic structure, when we read the prosody of the poem, we get to know the tone in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Different readers get different meanings, madam. Different readers get different meaning. So that's why we cannot say this is the tone of the poem. For example, daffodil is different for the Indians and it is different for the Western.
Yes.
Madam,
yes.
Are you asking for the meaning of the poem or the tone of the poem?
What did I ask, sir?
At the beginning.
Tone of the poem. Tone of the poem.
Yeah. And I believe that semantic structures and other things, they are related to the meaning of the poem. When you say that a poem is a text is autotelic.
I did not say text is autotelic when I say it is not just meaning when I say it is autotelic. You know, when you read a poem, you read it.
Yeah.
How do we read it? We recite poems most of the times.
Yes.
We recite them. And when we recite them, why do we have these rhythmic sounds? Rhythmic sounds and repetition of words and such things. What should they communicate to us?
Yeah, they communicate. they communicate different meanings. I mean, the same semantic structure.
Sir, let me continue. I will get back to you later.
Yeah, yes,
You are all speaking of, when you say that meaning changes, you are speaking of practical criticism. Okay, whatever you speak of a poem, it's valid and relevant in practical criticism. Okay, whatever we speak of the poem. See, this is a 4-line stanza. The poem has 4-line stanza, and the poem is so and so. It's your understanding. Everything is valid there. But a poem's tone is invariably bound by the words that have been repeated, the structure that has been there. And for instance, a poem like "A Slumber Did My Spirit Seal," it's just an 8-line poem. "A slumber did my spirit seal. I had no human fears. She seemed a thing that could not feel the touch of earthly years. No motion has she now, no force. She neither hears nor sees, rolled round in earth's diurnal course." In just 8 lines, what does the poet say? He speaks of a life of the individual which he had been close to, who was very dear to him, and his own condition in the love of her, how he forgot the whole world initially. But then the second stanza says, no motion has she now. Motion is associated with life. Movement is associated with life. Anyway, these are the things which I was talking about, only to drag your attention to find out the tone of a poem. When the tone of the poem is easier to find out, as the structure of the poem is limited to certain lines, how would we recognize the tone of an autobiography was a question that prevailed me. Okay, that is where I wanted to. It was really hard. So what I did was, I did go through some of the aspects that decide the tone of the voice, which would necessarily help me to find the tone of voice. Among them, there were a few factors like childhood, narration of childhood. You know, any person who writes his autobiography with an inner compulsion, or a serious biographer, as I would quote Richard Hogarth, would go to the farthest point of life, in farthest point of his life, to find the meaning in his life. And that would invariably childhood. And when a serious autobiographer, or a person who writes autobiography with an inner compulsion, renders his childhood, it wouldn't ever betray this kind of meaning that he would find out ultimately, or the destination that he would reach ultimately. That is what was the idea when one discusses childhood. Childhood is very crucial to one's life. Of course, there are other factors like conflict between self and the society, loneliness, and what I would say, there is irrational, rather than irrational, something beyond, an understanding beyond senses. These are the things which are other factors which contribute to the understanding of the tone of an autobiography, which is, at least to the autobiographies I discussed, which are common there. Anyway, let me get back to the first point which I was talking about. Childhood is crucial to one's life. Even while discussing an autobiography, when I intend to discuss Mama's childhood with you people, let me get back to other autobiographies. And before I go to other autobiographies, Dalit autobiographies, let me quote what Charles Dickens speaks in David Copperfield, which is supposed to be an autobiographical novel by Dickens. You know what Dickens says is, through this David Copperfield. I'll just quote. I don't remember it exactly. That's why I would quote. In the little world in which children have their existence, whosoever brings them up, there is nothing so finely perceived and so finely felt as injustice. Let me repeat. In the little world in which children have their existence, whosoever brings them up, there is nothing so finely perceived and so finely felt as injustice. So the first, even in the small world of the children experience and they immediately understand there is some injustice done to them. In fact, when he describes, David Copperfield describes Murdstone, his stepfather who took away his happy childhood in the togetherness that he had, rather than in the companionship of with his mother, Miss Murdstone, Mr. Murdstone's sister, both of them snatch away the childhood of David Copperfield. So children understand injustice so well. In the next part of the lecture, I'm going to discuss how child narrators are very crucial in understanding some of the texts. I will discuss that part in the second part of the lecture. So when I say this, I have other autobiographies in my mind. I have 3 autobiographies along with Bama's autobiographies, which I would mention: Uchalya, Gabala, and then Akarmashi. Akarmashi is half caste, which I discussed. You know, I'll give you instances of 1 or 2 incidents from those autobiographies and get back to Bama's autobiography, as my intention is to discuss only Bama's autobiography. You know, in Uchalya, there comes actually all these autobiographies speak of hunger that is almost the normal condition of Dalit childhood. In Uchalya, we come across description by the narrator where he speaks of the food that they prepare, the rotis that they prepare, the bread, Indian bread that they prepare, is from the cow dung. The grains which are there in the cow dung, they do wash it and they grind it, they make rotis and they take care of their hunger. And I can see Praveen feels so disgusted by the very description. I understand the disgust, because we speak of the human body with reference to 3 koshas: Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha. To see this human body prospered, our human self, our physical self of a human body prospered or grow properly, you need to nourish your Annamaya kosha with proper food. And in today's world, we are all very conscious of balanced food, conscious of it, but I don't know how many of us really take balanced food. Such description of food is there in one of the autobiographies. There is another description of in Gabala, I believe, Dadabai Mores Gabala. You know, they belong to a community which keeps on moving from one wandering community. It is, this community belongs to these people, this protagonist or the narrator belongs to a community which keeps on moving from one area to another because they don't have their proper shelter. When they move on, the desire of the parents is to provide education to a boy, and these boys, out of curiosity, along with the narrator, go to a school, and for some reason they get inside the classroom. And the boy is thrashed up so badly that there are marks on his body, on his buttocks, because the teacher makes him bow down and beats him. This is another event. I'm just giving you a glimpse of the childhood. And the third autobiography is that I am going to discuss in a little more detail is Akarmashi. In that autobiography, there comes a, in the very beginning, that is, it is in the beginning itself, the autobiography discusses this kind of situation. You know, the boy, Akarmashi Sharan Kumar Limbale, goes to school along with some of the boys. One fine day, they decide that they would go for a picnic. And the boy, all the boys go to picnic along with Sharan Kumar Limbale and some of the boys from his community. When they go to picnic, you know, these boys don't even have food to carry. They don't even have proper box to carry, you know. And some of them have got, but they know what hunger is, okay? They know what hunger is. So whoever has taken food along with them, they share with the others, from their community, and they eat the food, and their food is very little because they don't even get to eat food every day, very little, and they finish it off. But there is also another group of classmates who are from caste Hindus or Savarniyas. They too take food, and when they open the food, these children who are hungry, you know, they feel extremely fascinated by the fragrance of food. I can say, food, and they feel so hungry again. And then those students, those children, their classmates have food, and there would be some leftover, you know, and those leftover foods are given to these boys because they are without food, they are hungry. And these boys enjoy that food. And Sharan Kumar Limbale goes a little further and he tells us, he goes home and shares it with his granny and mother. What do you think our parents would have done if they would have known that we have eaten some leftovers of others' plate? What do you think they would have done? Rather, they would have been really upset. Wouldn't they be? You know what happens to Sharan Kumar Limbale's what happens in Sharan Kumar Limbale's case? You know, the granny and mother, both of them are upset that these boys did not take little food for them. You should have brought a little food for us. That's what they say. You ate on your own. What do these narrations speak of? Denial of education, denial of food, denial of social dignity. Isn't it? The other day when I was talking to Professor Langare, that was my point. You know, what happens is when you deny the basic requirements to certain people and you demand a dignified behavior from them, what is that we are doing? Aren't we being unjust? And I think that is what Dalit aesthetics is about. When Sidlingaya wrote a poem like Hole Madigara Hadu, where he started with Ikrala, Hakrala, Vadirala. For the people who don't understand Kannada, let me say, this is in terms of a very violent language from the basest way of expressing violence, beat, thrash, and kick. These are the things which are addressed to another. Isn't it something against our conventional aesthetics? You know, in ancient literature, we need to have, like epics, you need to have certain qualities in them, certain ingredients in them. In ancient Indian tradition also, literary tradition also, one needs to, a writer needed to have Ashtadasha Varnamas. Okay, description of 18 features of an epic. One had to do that. Where do we bring in this Dalit aesthetics amidst the well-known tradition of Indian literature? Is a question that we must keep asking ourselves. Should we really read writing like Dalit writing? Does it really hold any relevance? Is a question when we ask. You know, it was a great painter from Hassan, who is of an international repute. Right now I'm not able to, K.T. Shivaprasad, yeah, K.T. Shivaprasad, who also designed Kuppali, birthplace of Kuvempu's architecture of that very place is designed by K.T. Shivaprasad. You know, what he says is the most meaningful, I'm just quoting him, we don't need to just hear from him that the most meaningful literature must come from the ones who suffer the most. Maybe in that context, whoever is relegated to marginality, whether they are transgenders, or women, or Dalits, or lonely people, they all must be heard. It's the high time that we must question our own civilization, or it's the high time that we must question our refinement. It's the high time that we must question our education and get back to this section of society which is relegated to marginality. And how conveniently we close our eyes. How conveniently we become amnesiatic about the problems of this section of society who are humans like us. Actually, while taking up the afternoon session, I will take up what Shashi Deshpande speaks of, women question. You know, when we consider ourselves really learned or educated or refined or what not, we are the cream of society. Humans are the cream of this universe. We live in an anthropocentric society, anthropocentric world. Humans are the center of the universe because we are supposed to be thinking animals. Being thinking animals, are we really thinking? Are we really bothering about a section of society which is denied the basic requirements? Forget about food, shelter, clothing. That's denied. Mulk Rajanan's Untouchable describes Baka with all dignity, but Baka is dressed in a ill-fitted dress. And it is neither an untouchable nor the untouchable. It's untouchable alone. If childhood is all decisive in one's personality, if human dignity is so crucial for one's growth or welfare of the society, where are we? Why do we deny that to anybody? See, we feel so disgusted when we hear that the grains from the cow dung is from there, from the atta or the powder of it. One makes roti. Look at the sort of hunger. I think Kafan by Premchand describes the extent of suffering which is associated with hunger. I'm sure some of you are familiar to Kafan, or you or aren't you? In a very brief note, I'll sum up the story, what happens there. It's the story of some marginalized family which is suffering from abject poverty. what happens there is, there is a, in the family, there are 3 members. An old man, whose son and his wife. Both the son and the father are drunkards. They are heavy drunkards. They are alcoholic to that extent. And the daughter-in-law is pregnant. And she is almost in her full term. You know, these people go and beg the wealthy people for money, but people deny to give money. Or somehow they get some 2 potatoes or 2 or 3 potatoes. Ultimately, after begging, they are able to procure 2 or 3 potatoes. And in North India, weather is extreme. All of us are know. During winter, it is real winter, unlike in South India. Except a very few places. There is an object poverty and extreme winter. They don't have proper clothing. So what they do is they have some fire, and that fire is to keep them warm. And the daughter-in-law is inside the house. She is also hungry. But the hunger of the father and the son is so much that they don't bother to think of the pregnant woman at all. She keeps on crying because of pain, etc. But you know, these 2, father and the son, they are sitting before the fire. Father asks the son to go inside and take care of his wife. The son asks the father to get inside the house. Meanwhile, the 2-3 potatoes they have brought, they have put in the fire. Why do they do that? They do it because in case the one goes inside, the other may eat out the potato. That is the fear. Ultimately, the woman dies because she can't. There must be extreme malnutrition. Nobody would take care of her. And above all, she is pregnant, where all the body metamorphoses. It's a second birth for any woman. She dies. But then again, they eat the potato and get back to beg for kafan. Kafan is a shroud to cover the dead body. Okay, they get back. And somebody gives money, and once again they are drunk and they are lost. How do we read such story like kafan? Should we find problems with these 2 people, or should we find problems with a society which is not at all inhibited to treat anybody with so much of contempt? Or isn't it contempt? What else is it? If we deny the basic needs to somebody, isn't it contempt, or what else is it? It's all resentment to certain section of society. With these remarks generally, let me go to Bama's autobiography. You know what happens in autobiography is, I don't have the text with me, but I have my dissertation from which I would read a few excerpts from her autobiography. You know, actually, there is a pattern in her autobiography. What happens is, some people would read Bama's autobiography, Karukku, as a novel. Some people would read it as a social document. Some people would read it as autobiographical novel. There is another autobiographical novel. Of course, if we go by Toru, what he says, if I would have known myself, if I would have known others as much as I knew myself, it is in Walden, the beginning of the Walden, he says, I would not have written about myself. If I knew anyone else as much as I knew myself, I would not have written about myself. That's what Toru says. All writing is autobiographical that way. But you know, when Bama writes this autobiography, autobiographical novel, I would say, because she uses some literary techniques in this Karukku. It begins with a very scenic description of her village, how it is. There is everything in abundance. Sunlight, water, everything is in abundance. As against the intervention of privileged class of society who would deny the what is abundantly provided by nature to everybody, it is denied by certain section of society to someone else, some other section. And let me just read how it begins. I'll just read out from the text. Give me a minute. Please remind me as soon as I go to, even before 10 minutes, just let me, prior to the closure, okay? You know, mountains range right around the village of Bama. At dawn and at dusk, the eastern and western skies are splendid to see. The early morning, a bright red sun, huge and red, would wake up in the east and climb into the sky. It would make its way, peering between the trees, glowing, its light spilling and sparkling. At evening time, when it went and dropped through the mountains, sun that is, all the fields round about would blow through the fields. The crops glowing, staying in the breeze, filled the heart with delight. To look at the light in the western sky was like looking upon a revelation of God. Okay? There is an abundance which has been provided to the world, the very earth. And it is divine provision to the mankind. But you know, that divine light that is glowing in the village Bama makes us, while describing it, she impresses us while through relating herself to this nature, or relating nature to human activities. Okay, how does she do that? You know, she does it by naming those many things. Nature is there, but nature is named after human activity. How is it? Marakka Puchi Malai is so called because it resembles a heap of paddy. Okay, Marakka Puchi Malai is called so because it resembles a heap of paddy, which is connected to human world. Perumara mountain has on it a Perumal Sami temple. Vanpara so derives its name because Vanambais washed clothes in the tank up a hill, which is appropriately named Vattal Vithampara. Crops were vulnerable to the foxes that lived in the woods up a particular hill, what is understandably called Naripara. Okay, where foxes are there, they are called Naripara. Okay, lakes and ponds in and around the village derive their identity from the activities of the village. Podarkulam is for Podgar's use. Batrankulam gets that name after the priest who bathes in it. The lotus pond is fittingly called Periyakulam, and the lake of life, Jivaneri Kulam. The pond nearest to Bama Street, Anupanga Kulam, and its opposite shore gets its name Vatra Kulam from the neighboring village Vatra. You know, that's how human activity and nature are connected to each other. But then you know, this human activity and nature, the intervention of human activity in nature is something which is not positive to Bama's world, you know, but it is childhood. And in childhood, she doesn't realize. The other day, some of you were asking me that one of you was talking about humor in Bama's or Dalit narratives. You know, in Bama's autobiography, she maintains a pattern, I told you. As long as she is ignorant of casteist practices, her narrative employs humor as a mode of narration or as a device in describing people. But once she is aware of this discrimination, the humorous tone changes to grim tone. And this grim tone becomes almost grave and a lonely voice at the end of the narrative. And she uses an imagery of a bird which has cut off its wings and in a cage to describe her own condition in the novel, in the work. Karukku. You know, the spots are as familiar to the villagers as the space divisions within home, but this beauty and familiarity of nature becomes a subtle precondition to the poverty and exile within home predicament is tellingly conveyed in the way food becomes available to them in a season of plenty. Then there occurs an event, there is a rainy season. And during rainy season, all these ponds are filled with water, not just ponds, or not just with water, they're also filled with varieties of fish. And people who live on the banks of the seas and nearby the river or ponds, they love eating fish. But you know, there are varieties of fish. Bengalis will definitely know what it is. Diponjan Chakravarti must agree with me, right? Varieties of fish is a delicacy for people who live on the, or even people from Tamil Nadu who live on the bank, on the shore. You know, there are varieties of fish the pond has. There is abundance and plenty that has been provided by nature, but denied by human intervention. Lakes would overflow when people would catch any amount of fish by placing earthen pots just where the water flowed through. I'm quoting, the streets overflowed with fish during season. And there are varieties of fish. Silebi kendai, Karukku kendai, Keluti, Airai, Koravi, Viral. These are Tamil terms. In case I am wrong, please don't mind. Okay. But the low castes in the village can afford to buy only the cheapest Silebi kendai and Pampu kendai. That was the cheapest that they could afford to have. All other varieties go to the prosperous upper class. When nature is bounteous, human intervention or people's greed, people of certain section, their greed would not make it available to others. The unnatural, unreasonable practice of caste is thus introduced to us, to the readers. Okay, how well she introduces. She speaks of the beauty on the one. There is such a contrast. You juxtapose the bounty of nature on the one hand and denial of basic needs on the other hand. And that is how readers are introduced or induced to denial of basic needs and the caste practice, injustice of caste practice. It's even perhaps inevitable, spontaneous, you know. There is excess of food actually before the poor people. It's as though, you know, when you have excess of food around you, but you are not allowed to touch. It's Vivekananda who said that. Until the last person is hungry in my country, I would provide them food than teaching them religion. And it is him who said that I would teach football to young people than teaching them religion. we have this tendency to make it very religious and pious, but they were the ones who responded to human problems, human sufferings more compassionately than anyone else. Actually, Vivekananda makes a very fascinating reading to a great extent. He sometimes, it's said that he had many occasions where he had self-inflicted poverty and hunger. There were days when he did not have food for weeks. Initially, he thought that he would beg and have food. And then there came a day when he decided that he would not even beg for food. Only if somebody serves him food, he would eat the food. That is what he had thought. There were days, it is said, that he went without food for 2 to 3 days, and or many days rather, and he fainted, but he never begged. Such self-inflicted poverty, such wandering monk had experienced, because they were always compassionate to the ones who were without food, or the people who suffered. Anyway, there is an abundant food or bounteous food offered by nature and denied by a section of society. It's as though theft becomes inevitable in such a predicament. You know, not just inevitable, it becomes spontaneous and joyous activity. Okay. And I'll again quote from the text. I tell you, from the text, Karukku. Considering the approach of the poor, you know, you notice that the poor are the ones with a lot of food before them, but not allowed to. And I'll read through the text. As soon as the man who held the fishing rights for the pond paid off for his meal, everyone, big and small, would whip out their rods. You could catch fish easily. People would light small fires of straw right there on shore and roast the newly caught fish. It used to taste delicious. It's a stolen fish, remember. It tasted delicious. But if ever the caretaker caught sight of us, then that was it. He would confiscate all the fish and smash up the rod as well. One cannot, you know, but be impressed by the glee with which this episode is narrated. Sir Buneti, please mute yourself.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. We get really impressed by the glee or with happiness with which this episode is narrated in the autobiography. You know, she even goes to the extent of saying there is special taste to food snatched by stealth. You know, such bold assertion is possible only to marginality. It can come from only marginality. You know, you find that marginality becomes so conspicuous and natural in the novel. There is a small bus stand in the village that is the terminus in both literal and symbolic senses. The bus stand that they have is terminal, that's the end, in literal sense as well as in symbolic sense. The bus will take you no further. That's literal. It is as if our entire world ended there. Bama says that. There is a stream beyond the terminus which runs with water when it rains. At other times, it is a stinking shit field. You know, this marginal outcasts are made to live in outside the village, so that border would be used as a place to relieve themselves. Okay. for people. So when it would run with water during rainy seasons, otherwise it would be a sinking shit field. The low caste dwell literally in marginal spots, but the lowest, the pariahs, have their settlement just next to the cemetery. There is another movie in between. I thought that's also about Dalit life. Bayan, I'm sure some of you must have heard of. Bayan, a Marathi movie, which speaks of again a marginalized section of a society, marginalized section of society where the peace with which that family was living was not tolerated by the village people, and the husband succumbs to the pressure of the society and abandons his wife, calling her a bayan or a witch. And that woman, who was so delicate, beautiful, afraid of rains, storms, thunder, was made to live alone in the forest because she seemed to assert more than any other woman in the village or in her community. But then this woman saves the village in a crisis. There is a train that comes, and the train track is, there was a problem with the train track. There was one of the, lines got disturbed, and you know what happens is, this woman tries to warn the train driver, but that doesn't happen. What she does is, she stands herself and the train goes on her and the village is protected. Her son, who was denied to go to her when she was alive because she was called a bayan or a witch. Now, later the event is known to the district administration. They declare a prize to her. There is a prize money which is declared in the name of this woman, and people they come and announce it in the village, and they ask, do anybody knows who she is? Is anybody related to her? Then the boy says, yes, she is my mother. In her death, that bayan, that woman, finds her recognition, though she is the one who sacrifices her life. And again, that is the life of the marginalized. Anyway, let me get back to the text which I was talking. So what it means that, does Bama advocate only stealth, or what is she doing while she narrates this incident? What is it that she is doing? Bama actually is telling us that survival for the marginalized is stealing, to say the least. One has to steal to survive. You know, it is Dadabai More's Gabala which speaks of this theft as a profession of certain section of certain community of marginalized. Theft is their profession. Why would theft become a profession of anybody? When they are denied the basic requirements. How long would you be before food and hungry, not touching it? Anyway, there is a description of a man called Bondan. Bondan means snatcher in the autobiography, and he is described heroic. There is with some heroic attributes which Bama's narration gives. I am talking about the initial part of the this one, autobiography or the novel. I will not go to that complete discussion of the novel. I will only discuss childhood. As a precondition to childhood, I am talking about how the characters appear. I'll tell you about Bondan. He is Bondan Mama to many of all the Paraya children in the in Bama's community. He has the audacity to burgle the money offering and the temple bell of the Muniandi Sami temple. Muniandi Sami is the deity. His chief means of livelihood was stealing limes, coconuts, and mangoes. What does he steal? Limes, mangoes, and coconuts from the landowning families. Robin Hood becomes a hero when he steals from the rich people. When these relegated people do that, he is a thief, okay? But for those of the pariah community, he is heroic. There are some heroic ventures that he performs, and Bama's narrative says that. Bama's narrative makes Bondan's feats admirable and heroic. One midnight, he climbs a coconut tree when a strange form slides from above. He realizes it's a pay. Pay is a ghost, okay? Tormenting him, and he dashes off. He doesn't feel afraid of pays. You know, when that strange form pay slides from above, he realizes it's a pay tormenting him, and he dashes off, not for his home, but into another garden. Pay doesn't stop him from thieving. He is not afraid of pays. Isn't he heroic? There is a time at night when, after plundering mangoes from the grove, he jumps into a well to escape from the caretaker. But in the well, there is a snake, cobra, that is. And he stays there for a long time, keeping a deadly cobra from striking him dead. There is another fiat attributed to Bondan Mama. Once he was even bitten by King Cobra. What he did, he to his toe. He burnt his toe, cut off his toe, and you know what he did? With a sickle, he cuts off his toe and returns home after finishing his raid. He finishes his raid after the King Cobra's bite. Such a sharp fellow he was. Sharp fellow he was. This is what Bama says. Surviving the attack of King Cobra is a nearly supernatural feat. In fact, Bondan is shown encountering the supernatural in almost every episode. When village people pressurize him to return the temple offering and bell that he had stolen from the temple, what he does is, he goes to the temple armed only with cross. These are all converted Christians. Bama and others are converted Dalit Christians. You know, Bondan, armed with but a cross, deposits the temple money at night. After that, the terrible devil never came down our street again. Bondan has even survived an encounter with Ayangachi troop. Ayangachi troop is the troop of ghosts. When the merest glimpse of such a troop would be fatal to the next degree. Everybody is so scared, they may not even be alive, but he would even encounter that. You know, what happens is, this kind of strangeness and attributes, oddities that she attributes to Bondan is also attributed to many of her fellow Dalits in the whole of the narrative. And you know, each one of them get a nickname to themselves. And nicknames are associated with the activities that they would do or that are attributed to them. I'll tell you what are they. You know, they have some eccentricities about themselves. You know the difference between, I'm sure you know the difference between eccentricities and aberration. Eccentricities is just changing the space, okay? A circle, just if it changes its center, you know, it becomes eccentric. Aberration is not even the right circle, okay? in a very simplistic sense. All the marginal characters, they gain their names, you know, from their own eccentricities and peculiarities. Common, for example, is a crazy fellow who unpredictably alternates between extreme idleness and excessive industry. He is said to be an excellent cook, but when he cooks rice, he eats it all by himself. Common, okay? And washes the pots specklessly clean. He can polish off a half measure of rice all by himself. His real name is Maria Lourdes, but he is actually recognized by the name Common, which means Jack of all trades. A notable feature of Bama's narrative is that it introduces the Dalits as deriving their identities from their eccentric traits, characteristic features, and hence the currency given to nicknames. Bondan actually means nature, which I mentioned. The woman Kalinja, leaky, is so named because she leaks all over legs when she relieves herself. Midday Masala is another woman's nickname. She grinded masala to cook curry at day, when the invariable practice is to cook curry only in the evening. Kaka is the name that has struck to a woman who used to, as a child, chase crows. Someone who used to say Yendraya for Yengaya becomes Endraya all his life. Another child is nicknamed Munkovan, short temper. An excessively plump child is called Murugan Spring Pig. And there are many, many others. Konavachi, which means starer, Dumbo, deaf one, Ulamuki, running nose, Nadodi, wanderer, Vidvi, idiot, Neluchan, staggerer, Manachi, flat nose, needle bum, green nose, and so on. You know, that comes, of course, this kind of eccentricities of these people is once again just paralleled with that of the aberrations of the upper caste, which she sees through or she explains through two episodes. Her party, her granny, maternal and paternal, both, would go to Naikar's house to serve them. When a small boy in the Naikar household is called by her granny as Ayya, is sir, whereas this man, this young boy, would address her in singular. And her maternal granny would go to some other place where they would give the food, the leftover food, to her, and she would bring it as if it is ambroise, nectar, as if it would nectar. She would bring that home. And this, and she also, you know, she is actually, she is growing girl, and you know, she speaks of her childhood with all you know, all charm. She says her growth, the very process of her growth, you know, to a great degree appears to a great degree lies in her recognition of these oddities that are there in the society. Okay, oddities of her own community people. It's a 10-minute walk to her school when she is in her 3rd class. But she takes 30 minutes while noting so many things on the way, along with the performing monkey and snake charmer. There are many oddities that gain her attention. What are they? Let me quote from the text. The cyclist who had not got off his bike for 3 days, the rupee notes that is pinned to his shirt to spur him on, the dried fish stall, the statue of Gandhi, the street light always demonstrating how it could change from blue to violet, the Narikuruvan hunter gypsy with his wild lemur in cages selling needles, clay beads. There were the coffee clubs too. The way each waiter cooled coffee, a tumbler held in his other hand. you know. So Bama's growth involves her growing awareness of pariah identity. But then, you know, there is, I told you that she becomes aware of Dalit identity in a society by a small episode. There occurs an event in her life when she was going to going to her school. She finds an elderly gentleman from her community holding vadai, you know, the pack of vadai with a thread. Okay, it's and she finds it really humorous. She is all laughter to see an elderly gentleman holding the vadai packet only with a thread. And she comes and narrates it to her brother, Raj Gautaman. Raj Gautaman happens to be a well-known critic in Tamil literature. It is he who awakes her to a consciousness which would be sensitized to education. He feels and shares with her that it is education which can bring her relief, you know. And he says that it was not a matter of laughter. Actually, the elderly gentleman of her community held it through a thread because he didn't want to pollute it by his touch. Now, Bama's humor becomes a grave awareness of her identity as a Dalit. Let me stop here. I hope that you will continue, go through the novel itself too. Oh, it's already time. None of you reminded me, but I need to just make a brief note of childhood. Bama becomes conscious of her Dalit identity on the one hand. On the other hand, her two novels, one's Karukku and other Sangati, they make the readers conscious of the denial of childhood to the children. How does it happen? You know, children, when they started by denying them the games, you know, not that they would not play kabaddi and all such things, they would play. But most of the times, the children would play the game of going and working in the field and fetching wages and going to the shop and buying something, or going and working in the field of Naikars. That was another game that the children would play. And another game would be, they would be married and the husband would beat the wife. These are the games that the children used to play. My point is just this, you know, on the one hand, injustices rendered to the weak and helpless in society are shown in all their shocking intensity from children's perspective here. You know, children, I told you, I quoted David Copperfield, how they are extremely sensitive to the injustice to which they are subjected to. And secondly, we are also made aware of the denial of childhood to the low caste children. The denial of childhood is explained through these references. You know, the games that they play reflect the social hierarchy in which they live. 2 or 3 boys would, I'll just quote a little and then I stop. 2 or 3 boys would play at being Naikar. The rest of us could call him Ayya Ayya and pretend to be their Pannaya. Pannayal is slaves. These boys would act as if they had a lot of power over us. They would call us names, humiliate us, and make us do a lot of work. We would pretend to work in the fields all day, then collect our wages and go home. Another game runs like this. We also played at keeping shop. The boys managed the shop pretending to be Nadar Mudali. We would go there, hand over our tile money and buy all sorts of groceries to take home. Another one, then we played at being married and settling off. setting off on a bus journey. The husband comes home drunk and hitting his wife. The police arriving and beating him up. This is the childhood which is available to those children. There were genuine games, not that they weren't there. It's as if the very first thing children become conscious of, the very waking to life, is with the consciousness of the inequities and oppression in society. From Sangati, there comes a young girl who is called Makani. Makani is Kajal-eyed. It's a very beautiful young girl, Makani, who is made to go to forest to fetch wood to sell or for the household use. And Makani narrates 2 to 3 events from Sangati, not from this book anyway, that how she was subjected to a sort of violence which she was afraid of. She had run away from a landlord who had asked her to go. And 2 such events she narrates. And when I happened to meet Bama, I asked her, how is Makani? And to my disappointment, I heard that Makani was no more. Then I met Bama. I think I met Bama in 2006 or 7, I believe. I met her during those days, and she said that she was no more. And such is the children would go to. Children were made to go to factories from the family because there is abject poverty. They can't live without proper, proper basic needs, I mean to say. And the children were made to go to factories. And the money that the children earn from their wages must be given to parents. If the parents children would not give. Once it happens like this, Makani eats an ice cream because she is so desirous of ice cream or ice candy. And when she comes home and tells it to her father beats her up. And Makani is all tears. And Bama asks her what happened. This is what happened, she says. That's how, what I want to say is, through these things, the non-availability of a true childhood is a crucial aspect of Bama's Karukku. With this, let me wind up this session. In case you have anything, please, you are free to ask. We will make the next session smaller to compensate this. I hope I was able to communicate to you.
Madam.
Yes, sir.
Madam,
there are 2 voices.
Yeah.
Madam, Rangapagol, madam.
Rangapagol, sir. Tell me, sir. I'll come to you, ma'am, later. Yeah.
As my perspective, madam, all Marathi Dalit literature are similar in their theme, madam, I think. Dalit literature in Marathi language, madam. For example, what to Bama's Karukku, madam, it is very similar to a Poison Bread. There is a short story, madam.
Yeah, Arjun Dangles. I know. Arjun Dangles.
The similar theme is there, madam. When that Etle Aja is collecting the rotten rotis from that upper caste peoples are throwing outside the roadside and the cattle's ground, then the Etle Aja is collecting that one. At the final story is that Etle Aja is eating that rotten roti and he died of, madam.
True, true. Even in Untouchable, it happens. That's what. It actually, what I personally feel is, such Dalit aesthetics makes us introspective. It compels us to look into ourselves. We speak of so many high things. Are we really that? Is a question we need to ask ourselves. Yes, ma'am, you were about to ask something. Ma'am, somebody wanted to speak. I'm sorry, I couldn't view you here.
Yeah, madam. Madam, am I audible to you?
You are audible
madam?
to me now. Yes, ma'am. Sharda Shri.
Yes, ma'am. I forgot to unmute myself and I was speaking. That is why I couldn't hear.
It's okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. Regarding the impressions of childhood experiences in Bama's autobiography that we have just mentioned, ma'am, there is one incident which strikes me actually. That is why I wanted to bring this in front of everyone. Like once, I think it was her brother who was studying in the city, and when he comes back home, there is this elderly person who doesn't see him in the village often because he doesn't stay there. Her brother, I mean, and she he actually asked what is his name, and after getting to know his name, he's more
rather than name Dr. Sharda Shri, in which street does he live?
Exactly, ma'am. In which street he lives? That is what that elderly man wants to know, and the brother is very embarrassed in the sense that he doesn't want to know. He gets to know the intention of this elderly man, that why is he asking which is the street in which I live, because that would exactly give him the identity of his caste. So I think, and that he narrates to Bama.
He is able to locate from which social background he has come. That's why he asked the street. Paraya street is something which he did not expect, because he appeared educated. And
that is the thing that I think struck her brother also.